I would like to see the audience too, you know.
You know, come on, Ari. So
it's there. They're good. Good. Thank you.
Coming around the other side.
Yeah.
There's Kate and oh. Okay, so we have like 16 people in the audience at the moment. 17. So I'll just say a couple words.
Yes.
Ari is a veterinarian in Norway, and he had author of several books having to do with elemental beings and his work with them. Ari has worked on a number of sites where the owners or the people responsible for the sites were having difficulty with animals or with interactions of machines or energy sources with activities going on. And Ari's work has, through his capabilities, he's able to experience things that most of us don't. For example, the elemental beings, and they have helped him to arrive at solutions to some of these problems. And it's been quite successful and interesting. And so with this whole question of the welding together of man and machine, one of the big areas that we talked about, especially for the middle where Ari is located, is this whole work in healing. And so, Ari, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I have, hello everybody. What I have decided to talk about is more about the middle. As Andrew said, the mentioned very carefully, I don't know if he actually meant that, but it is the middle. I can make that a very long story over 3 days. I can make it a very short story. And it's not so, hello, very good. It's nice to see somebody, thank you. And I will try to make it into a 1.5 hour story. And this middle goes a long way back, because I realized very early in my career that all diseases in animals came from the humans, and also humans shared diseases. I later found that actually Steiner described that quite clearly under the heading of shared diseases. So for years I tried, although I didn't tell anybody about it actually, because I had a problem in treating animals or humans knowing that I actually pushed the disease just further onto next person or animal, and still paid for it. It seemed not really morally right. So I asked once Judith von Halle about how can I treat without just translocating the disease. And she said through, not directly, but through quite complicated paths, that I have to treat with the Christ consciousness. Then it will not lead to a translocation. And I was actually not closer, because what is a Christ consciousness? How do I treat with a Christ consciousness? And it took me a few more years, and actually the study of the what is called the group made by Rudolf Steiner and Marion, this English artist, you know, with Christ and Lucifer and Ahriman. I think you all maybe know that picture of that group. I guess, Andrew, they all know that. I have a little model here, which everybody have seen, I guess. And Christ is always then between Lucifer and Ahriman, and he pushes them apart. So then I came to this idea that the Christ consciousness is of peace. The Christ consciousness is not to, because in diseases, some diseases are caused more by Luciferic forces, some are caused more by the Ahrimanic forces. And most therapists, actually very many therapists or doctors, or they treat either the symptoms, they treat the Luciferic part, or they treat the Ahrimanic part, and then push it away. And then translocate it to another family member, or dog, or horse, or and so on. So then first time I thought about, okay, Christ consciousness is not to attack the adversaries. They are actually our friends in many ways. They are here to help us. We couldn't be here in the world without the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic forces. And we will later come back to that relating to machines and electricity and electromagnetism. So, so what I did the first time with extremely good result was I was just treating the middle between the Luciferic forces and the Ahrimanic forces. And the patient got cured. So then I was, wow, what is this? I didn't treat the disease. I didn't treat the symptoms. I didn't treat anything. I just sort of activated the middle. So I was very fascinated by this idea of Christ consciousness. So I invited myself to a European Congress. It was a pan-German Congress in craniosacral therapy. It was Austria, Switzerland, and Germany who had come together with a craniosacral Congress. And I invited myself, and I invited myself to give a speech, and I invited myself to give a demonstration. And then when I give demonstration, I love actually people to do it themselves, not I do it. So I addressed the leader of the Swiss group, national group, a very clever woman in craniosacral therapy. So we had a patient, and I said, okay, find where there is excess, where there is Luciferic forces. And she said, yes, that is in this area. And then find out where there is this deficiency. Yes, that is this area. And then I told her, now treat the middle, where there is no problem. And she said, I cannot treat something that is no problem. Yes, I said, we will try. Yeah, but we had actually a quite long, almost quarrel discussion about that. Treating something that is not a problem. How do you do that? how do you treat a fever that is not a fever? So I said, okay, don't think about it as treatment, just think about it as an activation. Activate the middle, just middle between these two places. And she did, and she was almost yelling. She said, it's gone. You know, all the symptoms disappeared almost immediately. So since then, that's time, that is maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I have been treating more and more and been more and more confident in just treating the middle, which I see then as the Christ. And interesting, Andrew said that I live in the middle between East and West. So then I started to work with the elemental beings of nature. First, I actually started to work with the etheric forces of the trees. Since many years, I could see them, because very early in my life, I trained on passing the threshold. And I did it in a slightly different way than Steiner describes in his Via Langtmann Erkenntnis. How do you obtain knowledge? And this method, which I actually found by myself very early in life, from about 6-7 years, made me capable of see the etheric forces. And when sort of ordinary clairvoyants talk about the astral, especially from Germany, I was always a little quiet, because I always came to the etheric first. So I actually didn't say anything, and I kept it for myself until I found a lecture where Steiner described a threshold passing, where you not go first into the astral and create astral organs and then sort of stamp them into the etheric, but that you actually develop etheric organs directly. Then you do not meet the guardian of the threshold at the threshold. And the first thing you come into is actually seeing the etheric forces and the demonic world. And that fitted me very well, because I work with disease. And this method, very interestingly, Steiner described in 1912 in Helsinki. He described it in great length, and he described actually the same method I then have been using since I was 6-7, which you can use to actually see the middle, because the middle is in the etheric. The middle is not in the astral, as the true second coming of the Christ is, for the time being, in the etheric. That's why you can sort of see the Christ middle in the etheric and not in the astral. I guess that in a few thousand years he will appear in the astral, and then later on, then also in the spiritual, in the I consciousness. This method is also described 2 other places. One by Steiner in Helsinki. He was actually the intention was to give it in Russia, but he wasn't allowed into Russia in 1912. So it was actually for the northern people. It is also described in Parsifal. I guess many of you have read Parsifal, and when you remember the scene where he was riding through the snow, and that is quite also interesting that it was in the snow, and then a hurt bird had dropped 3 red blood drops in the snow. You have know what I mean? Yes. And then he fell into he faded into the blood drops. And what happened then? 3 opponents came. First one night, then he faded into which he also, of course, defeated. Then he faded into the blood drops again, and then he had to defeat the second knight, and then he faded into the blood drops again, and he had to defeat the third knight. And this was in the winter. For me, quite interesting. The third place I find this method described is in Kalevala. Kalevala is the Finnish national epos, which Steiner said is actually a epos for the whole world, and it describes the spiritual world at a quite high level. And the Kalevala is divided in 50 songs. And the 50th song is actually where the Christ forces appear. Like in the Scandinavian Edda, also where the Christ forces appears in all at the end of the Edda. And then in the Kalevala, they appear with Mariatta, which actually is Maria. And she conceives a child. But when she conceives it, it's not, she is described as a very pure virgin, never been with any man, living with her father and mother. And then she go into the forest in the winter, in the snow. And there she find a lingonberry. Lingonberry. That is a berry that grows in the northern part of Scandinavia or in the mountains. The name is actually Swedish. We call it Norwegian, we call it tyttebær, and in Sweden, lingonbær, and I have used that in English, lingonberry. And this lingonberry, she fades into looking at this lingonberry, and this walks up through her body, into her mouth, go down into her stomach, and then she is pregnant. And then she meets 3 obstacles. Her mother first, who of course do not believe her. You've been with a man, she say. No, I have looked at the berry. Of course, she doesn't believe it. And then her father, the same, and then the neighbor, the same. Again, 3 opponents that wants to punish her for being pregnant. And after that, she can see into the etheric. And after Parsifal had also defeated these 3 knights, he could come closer to the Graal castle. And this I also experienced several times in my life. 3 persons come and confront me with my karma. And then that has to do, to solve this karma, I have to go into the etheric. Now we come to the middle. Because of this training with the etheric passing of the threshold, I was very early able to then observe the middle between the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic, both in animals and in humans. And now we come to a more interesting part this was introduction to why I say what I will say, or sort of with what grounding, with substance I say it. So I gave a course in Germany, that is 4 or 5 years ago maybe, about this using the Christ consciousness in healing, or I called it not Christ consciousness, because today that is a very difficult word. You know, Christ is almost a taboo word in many connections. So I was just teaching how to treat the middle, and then I put it in after a while, this Christ and also the wooden statue, or the group statue of Steiner and Edith Marion, now I remember her name. So we came to a place, as a veterinarian, they always want me to go to horse places. So I was at this horse place where all the horses were lame. All of them. 13, 14 horses. And they all had the same origin. So I was wondering why. they had the same, you might say, the same pathological cause of their problem, even though their problems was different. And then I went out of the stable, and there, just 150 meters away, was a huge mast, 4G mast, cell phone mast. So then we tried to sort of isolate.
So, okay, good, you heard. You have 4G cell.
What's happening?
We understand now. The cell
Okay.
tower.
Yeah, cell phone mast. Yeah.
Yes. We understand.
Good. And then we try to isolate against this mast, between the horses and the mast, and then this pathological influence disappeared. And then I said, okay, what we do? What shall we do with this mast? And then one of the students said, why don't we treat the middle? I said, yeah, why? That was the first time I ever thought about treating a dead thing. Electromagnetic radiating mast. So we went out, and then when I then sort of turned on my etheric clairvoyance, it was very obvious the Luciferic forces was in the upper third of the mast. The Ahrimanic forces was in the lower third of the mast. You know, it was a 70, 80 meter mast or something. And in the middle was the Christ forces. So what we did was concentrating on the Christ forces, sort of pushing the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic apart, and in 10 minutes all the horses were healed. We did this for 10 minutes, and after 2 years we contacted this horse place, and the horses were still completely healthy, not lame. So then I started to work, and at this point I came in closer contact, well, a certain time later, with the MysTech, who were working with these problems of electricity, magnetism, electromagnetism, and of course finding a solution or an other way of using it. We have been discussing that, how to use. I can take this off, I guess. I don't need to hear you. So then I did this more and more, and for example, I was in there was a Congress, light Congress in Oslo. There is a Norwegian, he's a Norwegian German, Raphael Kleiman, if you happen to have heard about him. He's working much with the problems of light and how effect they have on children in school. For example, Steiner School or other schools. And he has done quite much investigation with electric light, with this neon light, these tubes, and with LED light. And he told me something very interesting, that was in schools, I don't know this myself, this is only what he told me, in schools where they have LED light in the classrooms, the children tend to make their drawings only on the upper 2/3 of the paper and leave the last third blank. Then we did some investigations of these LED light, and then we separated on the LED light, just like we did on the mast, and the negative effect disappeared. Then I must tell you another interesting thing, because some years before, there was a Camp Hill village in the middle of Norway who had experienced a lot of problems. And when Camp Hill villages have problems which I don't understand, they often ask me for some advice. So I went up there, and when we drove close to the Camp Hill village, I was observing, then I already had turned on the etheric clairvoyance, and I was observing something very strange which I'd never seen before. That was, all the houses were 1/3 dark without etheric, and 2/3 normal with etheric continent. And I didn't understand it. Why is 1/3 of all the houses sort of pathological? And then we reached the Camp Hill village, and then I saw something that I did not expect from anthroposophists. They had built the first windmill in Norway in the middle of the village. And they were very proud because they were self-sufficient with electricity.
Ari,
Yes?
can you repeat what they built in the center?
A windmill.
For electricity.
Yeah, to produce electricity. A windmill, you know, like they have all over now, these huge that go around and produce electricity. And in the production of electricity, elementals, pathological elementals were created. And these elementals, they sort of emptied 1/3 of the space for good etheric forces. This I observed, that's 8-9 years ago. And at that time, I had no idea what to do. So they asked me what to do. Today, I would say, of course, we separate the Luciferic Ahrimanic forces in the windmill. And what interesting is this observation by Raphael Kleiman, that in schools where they use LED light, in Norway we say LED light, but that means LED in America, so we don't understand LED light, they leave 1/3 of the sheet not used. That's quite interesting. That explains actually this that I observed 8-9 years ago. So in this production of electricity, when you produce electricity from wind, in Norway we produce a lot of electricity from water power. We have so many waterfalls. And those elementals that are created in the production of electricity from water are water elementals that are sort of forced into under nature and become electricity. If you produce it from wind, the elementals that are pushed into under nature are the air elementals, and they have a quite different effect from the water elementals. And the worst elementals I have seen with the solar panels, if you produce, you know, the sunlight is almost holy. It is so divine. And then you press these elementals, which is actually the fire elementals, the sunlight elementals, into the under nature, and they become especially pathological. So I think this solar panel will create a lot of diseases in the coming years. They are actually quite terrible to look at. We also, are there any questions so far? I talk and talk and talk.
Go ahead. Just get up close to the microphone.
I have plenty of questions, but I'll reduce mine to
one or two. You were saying at the beginning, you talked about Parzival, and you talked about 3 drops of blood, and then the lingonberry and the relationship to the etheric. Could you just say something about the 3 drops of blood relationship to the etheric and the lingonberry? Was that clear?
Yes, it was clear. It was, you see, this fading into the 3 drops is the same as Steiner described in his Helsinki cyclus in 1912,
Okay.
where you fade into the blue. Maybe some of you remember it. You have to fade into the blue of the sky. You fade into the white of the snow. You fade into the green of the nature. Interesting, again, 3 ways to fade into it. And then you cross the threshold in the etheric and not in the normal astral. When I say normal, I do it in inverted comma. And for me, it is quite interesting that Parsifal, he faded into these blood drops, and Mariatta, in the Kalevala epos, she faded into a red lingonberries in the snow. Also looks like blood drops. So for me, that was very, very, very similar.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
All set.
All set. So when...
All right, one more question.
Yes.
Talk to this. The
Yeah.
microphone's here.
Yeah.
We won't hear you.
1 minute.
I don't hear anything.
Okay.
Now I hear. Now I hear.
Now you hear me, I'll speak a little louder. Okay.
Yeah, there.
I have been thinking about the story in the stables ever since you posted it on Facebook. I'm Kate Allum, and I live in Ann Arbor. And so through MysTech, I was introduced to that story. And ever since then, I am wondering how you perform the etheric thoughts or the etheric meditation, especially as it is distinct from the rest of what Steiner has taught us. And I hope at some point, you don't have to do it immediately because I'm asking, but at your discretion, could you give us insights as to how you do this meditation? Because in your Facebook statement, you said anyone can do it. And so I'm interested in that.
Yeah, that was an unnecessary question because to fill out 1.5 hours, I plan actually to teach you this.
I might mention, Ari, that Ari has offered to teach a class. We haven't made the arrangements, but he was referring somewhere in New York State, perhaps Harlemville or Spring Valley, to offer such a class. And I need to work with Ari to set that up later.
Yes, that will be in November 2020.
It would be, well, it's up to Ari, but I believe he would like it in person rather than online.
Yes, I would like it in person, of course, but I will do it now online too. So, yes. I will also, well, I do that now all the time with cell phones, and I can demonstrate actually how I do it, and you will do it yourself. If a person is allergic to a cell phone, and more people get allergic to cell phones, then you can divide, you can push the luciferic and the Ahrimanic forces apart on the phone, and suddenly they are not allergic. And this is an immediate effect. They can suddenly talk with which they could not before. And I have tried that also in my house. We have now in Norway, they are installing so-called smart meters. I think they do that all over the world. And I had this, I refused to have it. And then I realized we could just separate. And then I asked to the first in Norway who asked to have it installed again. So they came and installed it, and I separated, and the effect, negative effect, was gone. I can tell many stories about this from medical practice, but I guess you are not that interested in that. This will not be a story about, oh, you can do this and this and this and this. The most important is to understand, for you, is to understand the middle. So if you have your cell phone now, it can be off or on or whatever. And then you think about this statue. You see the Lucifer, how he looks. You see the Ahriman, how he looks. And you sort of have this imagination in your head. Think this statue with the Christ in the middle, pushing Luciferic forces up, Ahrimanic forces down where they belong, and not, you see, when they get too close in animals or man or machines, they create the disease. And we will later talk a little about the electromagnetic, which is actually a link of the electric and the magnetic forces. So now you think about this statue here, and then you put a cell phone here, sort of to resemble it. Then you see in your mind, the Luciferic forces here, the Ahrimanic here, and then you separate them like this. And you do it with intent, with your will, with your imagination. And when that is done, the effect, the negative pathological effect, the grip that the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic forces have on you through the electromagnetic radiation is gone. So I would like you to try to do that now, those of you who have, and try to feel what happens. Feel it in your heart. What happened when you do this? I will not give any indication what to feel or not to feel, but that is something maybe you can tell me afterwards, those of you who have a cell phone. But you have to use your will, intention, and imagination. It's done quite fast, actually. But I give you 1 minute now to do it. Yes, you do it. What is his name, Andrew, the one beside you? What's his name? The red shirt. What? Ted.
Daniel.
Daniel, yeah. Okay. You did it quite right. Quite correct. Now I must ask you that are in the room, do you have another feeling from Daniel's cell phone now than 1 minute ago?
I want to point something out to all of you. When Ari did it, if you noticed, his hands were like this. And if you look at the representative of man, the hands are like this as well. Like this.
Yes.
So it's not easy, but try it. Fingertip. Yeah. And just to blow your minds away, if you look at Spock from Star Trek and you ask what artistic thinking went into that, Spock, when he does this gesture.
And he is a Vulcan being.
I don't know. Ah, okay. So that would call on the form of the human being to invoke. You're invoking the cosmic form of the human being. Well, if it's Yahweh that you're invoking, Yahweh is the Elohim being who guided the form of the human being.
Correct. Yes. So I will ask some of you, do you sense a change in the cell phone?
People are saying they felt lighter and I felt calmer.
Yes, and that is the word almost everybody use, that it becomes lighter, not heavy. So you see, this is actually something you can use on all electromagnetic. And I was wondering a lot, how can that be that you can sort of, because in our minds all the time we have experienced electromagnetic radiation as not beneficial for the health. You know, that is something we think. And then I've been thinking quite much about electromagnetic radiation. Is it as such? And then I have been many years, I have been making homeopathic remedies myself. And in making homeopathic remedies, you take a poisonous substance, for example, arsenic or whatever, lead or whatever. And then you, with a procedure, you separate the toxic part from the etheric part, you separate sort of the toxicity, the material toxicity from the spiritual. You throw away the poisonous part and you use what is left, the spiritual part, as a medicine. So in homeopathy, you actually separate the spiritual from the material. Yes? And what we do in this electromagnetic radiation, you see, on the electricity, in the electricity, and in the magnetism, the Ahrimanic and the Luciferic forces are riding. They are actually riding not on the electric cable, they are riding inside it, in a hole. There is sort of a spiritual hole in the electric stream. Inside there, these adversarial forces are riding. And by doing this, you separate the electromagnetic from the adversaries. I have a very interesting example. I was contacted by a man in Australia. So he said, I had put up solar panels on my roof, and since that I have had headache all the time. He was sensitive to it. So I said, and he had this meter that was measuring the field strength of the electric and magnetic field strength. And then I asked him, okay, send me a picture of your solar panels, because I can do this also through, if I only have a picture, because distance is irrelevant in the spiritual world. So he sent me a picture of his roof with a solar panel, and I divided the Luciferic and Ahrimanic in them. And then 2 days later, he wrote to me and said, your treatment didn't work. It was a failure. And I said, oh, nothing happened? Yes, he said, my headache is gone, but my meters still show that there is electricity. And I thought that was so good, because he didn't realize, of course, that there are two things in electromagnetic radiation. You have the Luciferic and Ahrimanic spiritual forces, who are, of course, not electric or magnetic, but they are using these forces to sort of materialize or activate themselves in the human society. I must also tell you, which I maybe have done, because that was done in America, and we, as I very seldom I am. In Norway, we don't have I am, you are, he is. We have the same word. Jeg, han er, du, hun er, and so on. So I was on this restaurant in America, and such restaurants we do not have in Norway. And this was a big room, and there were about 40 televisions. Every 2 meters there was a television with different channels, and people were sitting eating. And on one of the channels were Super Bowl, and 3 men were sitting at the table eating, looking at Super Bowl like this. And then I sat there with 2 colleagues, and I said, now I will do a trial, trial with these 3 men and this television. So I went behind them, because they were looking at the television up at the wall, and they were sitting here, and I went behind them, and then I did the dividing on the television with my intent and will. And what happened was beyond my expectations. Suddenly they woke up and looked at each other. Oh, there are some human beings here. They looked at the food. They looked a little at the television, but they went from zombies to human beings. So you know, this total electrified society is delivering us, all of us, over into the hands of especially the Ahrimanic forces, also the Luciferic, but today the Ahrimanic are the most serious. That is, with the cars get electric, you know, everything now get electric, very few is mechanical anymore. The computer is electromagnetic, and so on and so on. That's why I'm actually a little ambivalent in doing these talks on an electromagnetic medium, but that is how the world is. And as long as you have this knowledge and can let this light this knowledge through the light of knowledge, or shine into these machines, then you can actually treat the screen, and you can sort of push out the Ahrimanic and Luciferic forces from the conversation. It's quite interesting. I just came to think about what Steiner said about this writing with the hand and writing with a typewriter, and probably even more with a computer. That what you write with the hand, this movement, then you actually get the attention of the angels. But when you write on a mechanical or electromagnetic, you get the attention of the adversarials, and the angels cannot see it even. They cannot contact you. So that is actually sort of making this room in all these devices. Well, that was actually what I thought about bringing you today. I will talk more, but this is sort of now the foundation of the theory. How much time have we used? We have used 1 hour, about.
We have a question or a point.
We have a question.
Jeff, go ahead, Jeff. Just go up and stand up next to the things we can see you.
Hello. My name's Jeff Henney.
You have to speak more.
You have to speak down there.
Yeah, my name's Jeff Henney. I just wanted to ask your views. In order for us to avoid, well, we're not going to avoid disaster from climate change, but to improve the issue, the problem of CO2 emissions, it's essential, at least at minimum, for us to go as electrical as possible, provided that electricity is generated by things like solar or wind or hydropower. Without doing that, without going electrical, we are back at burning fossil fuels, which is destroying us. So how do you deal with that dilemma, that we need electricity to avoid climate disaster, which we probably won't avoid anyway, but at least we have a chance?
I don't have a solution to that, of course. I am just pointing that in the production of electricity, you create pathological elementals. And I would think that the only solution is to use less electricity. The problem is production of electricity. You know, most of the power goes through, you know, from coal and to electricity, from sun to electricity, from waterfalls to electricity, from wind to electricity, from waves to electricity, all goes through electricity. And the first step is, of course, to use less electricity. And the consumption of electricity is sky high in America, especially with the cooling of homes in the southern part of America. And I guess that if we can come to use etheric energy to drive machines, like the Keeley or the Strader machines, then we can solve that problem. And now I see a woman there.
Yes, hi. I'm Judy Erb, and I have a question about when you healed the solar panel effect, you don't change what happens to the beings, that the highest beings who are now being sent down into the lower regions. And I'm wondering, what is the consequence of that? We've kind of shielded ourselves from their suffering, but what about them, and what does that imply for the rest of the creation here?
This has nothing to do with the elementals that is created. It is not the elementals that are shielded from. It is the Ahrimanic and the Luciferic forces that will allow the Christ forces to shine forth in the middle. So what I do, I'm not shielding anything, I'm just letting Christ in.
Thank you.
And I've seen when I do that in treatment of diseases, then you and that is actually the start of my voyage in this thing. Then you transform the diseases and you don't translocate them to the neighbor. You see, then you transform the disease. Hi.
Hello. It's Mark Catchin. I have a question about diseases that are not EM caused. You mentioned earlier about you worked on just straight diseases.
Yes.
Medical diseases. Do you do the same process then?
Same process. You see, what I observed quite early is that all sick people or animals, the Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces are closer together than in a not sick human or animal. So what I do is just to strengthen or activate the middle between Lucifer and Ahriman to let the Christ in, and that works on all diseases. It's nothing to do with electromagnetic radiation diseases. That is a part that was later when I saw that you could actually, when the cause is electromagnetic radiation, you could do the same with that. That for me was actually a shock when a student said, can't we treat the middle of the mast? I hadn't thought about that because I treat the middle of the human being or a tree or an animal.
Hi, my name's Deborah. I'm a family physician. When we use homeopathy and mistletoe with human beings, are we actually opening up the middle with those remedies, and then we should be using ourselves in terms of thinking in that same fashion as we're using them?
Yeah, this is quite interesting question, because when you study some of the remedies that Steiner prescribed, especially those which ends on oron, hepatodoron, raumadoron, cephalodoron, and so on, they are almost always constructed from 3 parts. And if you look at them homeopathically, it often doesn't make much sense. They actually open this middle. But if you use, for example, homeopathic remedies, they can translocate diseases like aurum gold D12 or lead D30 and so on. They, if you then put them against the symptoms, like a homeopathic, like Hahnemann described. Hahnemann did translocation. And then he started to describe the miasms, which were actually these Luciferic or Ahrimanic forces. But the sort of pure anthroposophic medicines, which are not that many, they work in the same paradigm as I have now described. So yes, quite many anthroposophic doctors also translocate diseases. And interesting thing is that when I start to look for that, and it would be very nice that you could do that also. Was it Deborah? Yeah. You can see when you treat one person in the family, after a few months, another disease comes up. It's not the same. Yes, it's not the same. And that is, you can follow, if you look in the etheric, you can see this demon, which one of my books is called Demons and Healing. You can see this demon actually go from one person to the other. So, and when I start to talk about patient, for example, a woman, I treat her for, let's say, a cystitis, and then she gets cured. Let's say I use uva ursi or quartz D12 or whatever. And after 3 months, her husband gets a, prostatitis, or doesn't have to be the same. You see, these demons or these forces, they go where they find the human being most vulnerable. So it can be a migraine, or it can be a bad backache, or it can be a prostatitis or whatever. So it's very, very important. And if you look carefully about what Hahnemann said in his last, the 6th edition of his Materia Medica, and also later what other wrote about the chronic diseases, you can actually find the description of a translocation. And now I will tell you something interesting, because now this is very important to me. And this I could talk about 2 hours about. When my book on this, I was so lucky that a certain Chinese translator would translate my books to Chinese. And she was quite upset because, you see, in China, they know about this translocation when they do acupuncture. If you do acupuncture in the Chinese way, you always translocate the diseases. And Chinese acupuncturists, they very often have a stone or a plant or something in their office and try to translocate diseases into them. And this they have not told us in the West. So they know about translocation. And I was quite upset about it. This is a scam that has been going on for 4,000 years. They have exported acupuncture, and it didn't say that it just translocated the diseases. And I knew it. And this especially built on the Chinese 5 elements, and also when you treat the symptoms, let's say you give symptomatic treatments, you translocate the demons causing the disease. But if you treat the middle, like in hepatoduron, cephaloduron, rheumaduron, pneumoduron, and so on, then you start to transform diseases. Or if you treat the middle, like I taught you, between the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic forces. So now I try to bring this information to European and Scandinavian schools in acupuncture. And they are not happy because they have their curriculum, they have their PowerPoint presentations of 5 elements, and all this is then in vain because nobody wants actually to translocate a disease, because that is highly unmoral. It's like tax money, you know. they just move around.
Thank you very much.
Did it make sense? I don't hear anything now.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Claudia Fontana. I'm a eurythmist. And I would like to know if you can do that on yourself, the healing, or if you can only do it on another person and somebody else has to do it on you.
That I do not know because I have not tried yet. I have not been sick. So I look forward, I will try that.
You don't have to tell me, honey. Hi,
Hello.
my name is Kay. I'm trying to imagine that your methods have spread throughout the community of physicians for humans and physicians for animals. And I am imagining that the incidence and prevalence of certain kinds of conditions would get better, And that would not only be because individuals were being helped, but because translocation was being blocked. And what I'm interested in finding out is your thinking on how to make these methods standard practice globally among veterinarians and human physicians.
Oh. You know, I have very little hope in doing that. You see, this thinking of letting Christ in, I think, is just for the very, very, very few. And for those of you who have read any of my books, I often have a very positive statement in the beginning that I actually see no hope that this will be a common treatment. I see no hope for that, actually. My only hope is to bring it to those who can hear, those who have ears. So if you have been, you know, I was asked by the Veterinary School of Norway, there is only one veterinary school in Norway, I was asked to come and give a lecture about whatever I wanted. And I thought about, shall I be tactical or shall I be honest? So I thought I am too old to be tactical, so I thought I'll be honest. So I had this 150 of the top veterinarians of Norway listening to this talk about translocation from humans, and that you have actually to treat the human and not the animal. And if you treat the human, the animal gets well much faster. And, you know, I will never be asked to come again. The day after, I got a mail from 2 of the female veterinarians who were there, excusing their male colleagues for being rude. And for many, many years, I have been treating, you see, the animals are not the prime source of disease, that is the humans. So when you treat the human being, and you treat the human being through the middle, let the Christ forces in, then the animal get cured, I will say 3-4 times faster or more effective than if you treat the animal. So this I have been teaching for many years, especially in Germany. And now they actually start to understand more and more that the human being is the cause of diseases in veterinary medicine. And that is one step, but then the next step is to get them to know that if you treat these diseases in a sort of normal way, that is, you treat the luciferic symptoms, you treat the Ahrimanic symptoms with the remedies or plants or whatever, you translocate still these problems you have actually to treat, like Judith von Halle said, in a Christ consciousness. So we have just to wait for the 6th cultural epoch, I think. I have very little hope for the 5th cultural epoch.
I have something, it's Deborah again.
Yeah.
Do our homeopathic preparations, are we treating the middle when we're doing the preps and we're putting them on the crops and in the soil?
Probably not. You see, this is to do with the person, how he can see the disease. It is like, let's say you go to a psychologist, you have problems. And then the psychologist can choose 3 different ways. He can focus on your excessive symptoms, your anger, your discontent, that is the excessive symptoms, the luciferic symptoms. He can concentrate on the deficient symptoms, where you lack in self-confidence, where you lack in energy, where you lack everything like that. And then he can actually concentrate on the third method. That is the middle. Sort of what makes you happy? What makes you feel love? And that is much more this Christ way, love. What makes you feel, what does make you feel love your neighbor, and so on. And that is also a psychological method that is proven to work, and that we have actually to transfer into homeopathy. We have to transfer it into herbology, and we have to transfer that understanding into a general medical understanding.
This is Kay again. You've just described an avenue to reach the people you think you can't reach. You've shown that something has to be transferred, and the methods by which physicians, human physicians, and I'm assuming veterinarians, although I don't know that field, change their practices. It's through peer-reviewed research often. There may be other influences. And if you get results, you've told us about that. The question would be how to conduct a trial, meeting the various standards, including to have a control group if you could go that far with a trial. And then you have something in the literature to demonstrate it. And since you've got an audience here who believes you're right and understands and wants to help, I'm wondering if there are ways you can reach stakeholders and people with authority and resources to say, can we figure out how to take what we know works into a way of demonstrating it that satisfies a whole lot of other people?
Yeah, okay.
Am I making sense?
I thought that when I was younger. I have lost all hope.
Well, how old are you?
67.
And I am 77, and I believe in what I just told you. So
yeah, but you see,
going on it.
You see, I have done this many times, and I have been let down so many times. So if you can make something happen there, I will, of course, do it, but I need help to do that. I cannot do that alone. Yeah.
I have a question before Kay gets into gear. I know she's going to get a campaign going. So one thing I'm puzzled about is I understand the separation. I understand you're letting this Christ force in. What I'm a little more puzzled about is, you know, how long does this effect last? I imagine these adversary forces would want to come back in.
Yes.
And so I'm a little confused about the lasting effect and whether it's only certain people that it affects. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yep.
The solar panels. Yeah. Right.
Yes. I am, to my knowledge, one of very few who do this method. I have taught it, and I have several who have been to these not courses, it's just very few people who say they have excellent results with this. And then you ask me, how long does it last? When we were 14 persons or 12, 13, 14 persons who did this separation in 10 minutes, it lasted for at least 2 years. That is this horse in Germany. I gave a course in Florida, and there was an American Chinese woman there who, when she took her cell phone, she had to hold it 1 meter away, otherwise she got red face. She was highly allergic. So I did one trial there. This course was 4 days, and I did it the first day, and I did it from distance, and I did it just 15 seconds, and it lasted all the course. But of course, I should have got her telephone number and called her. How does it still work? I should have done much more of this work. That is, and not only me who say that, but many others, that is my main deficiency, main problem through my whole scientific life. I have not the excess of time and energy to follow up all this and call them. So for this, I had a secretary once who did, and then I had some insight in the effect. This is 30 years ago, so when I sort of was a hard-working veterinarian. And this man, of course, in Australia, I should have kept his email and asked him. I am not capable of doing that much, I have to admit. And like Kay said, you just find this and do an investigation and do this and this. That is actually not. I can do the treatment, but I have others to evaluate and others to write down everything. That is not, and I cannot do it alone either. You know, everybody there know who is scientifically that the one who do the trial cannot evaluate because they are not, they are biased. So I don't know how long it lasts, but it lasts a considerable length of time if you do it properly.
Okay, I have one other question, and then Andrew has a question. So I work for a company that is based in London, and I have to communicate with them over video. And sometimes I have very stressful meetings where they're putting all the problems of the company on my shoulders. And I've never gotten headaches in my life until the last few years. I get massive migraines, but only when they're throwing this incredible stress at me. And I've been thinking about how to protect myself because it really is kind of an attack that's happening. And I have to go immediately to a mall, to one of these chairs that has a massage chair that can just knead my back because it's in so much torturous pain. Is there anything you could think of that would help?
Of course, that's what I've been talking about. You do that to the screen.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to check.
Yes.
I thought I just wanted to check.
Yes, and I had this very interesting talk with Nicanor Parlas, who had been in America. I met him in Oslo, and I told him I would like to make a trial. Because I want three things. I want a picture of a supercomputer or a super, where the internet comes from, a super whatever, I'm not really, don't know, but they call it something. And then I want an observer for those people who are connected to that server. An observer by the health, headache, migraine, sleep, how good they sleep, and so on. addiction, drugs use, medical use, whatever, to those group who are connected to that server. A picture of the server, observation of that, and then I do this separation on the server at a certain time, which of course double blind and so on and so on. And then you see what happens to those people. And he was very excited about that, but he didn't know how to observe these things because he lives in the Philippines. And so we need some local persons, and that would be very good. I need only the picture of the server. You have a survey of the people connected to it, and then you have to have a sort of investigation, how much headache, how much, and so on and so on.
Okay, well, I might be able to help with that, but I'll let Andrew get in here with his question.
I want to first start out by saying thank you very much, Ari. We're reaching the end of our time. Oh, wow. We're hearing lots of applause, I hope. And I feel here in the West, MysTech, I feel, is on the right track. Of course, it's going to be waves. We'll go wrong for a while, we'll go right, we'll go wrong, we'll go right. But I feel we're moving in a positive direction. And I feel, you know, you right there in Norway with, Norway. I got all confused because I've been at a person's house that's associated with Finland. But yeah, so in many respects, I think we're hearing about what is necessary in our times in the hygienic occultism. And you are practicing this, and I'm sure more will come. Have you run across people that we might add to this, making it a triumvirate of the threeness, who are familiar with the future eugenics? Probably not, but if you know colleagues that you might introduce us to at some point, I would, you know, maybe next year in our MysTech conference, we might involve them as we've involved you this year.
Yes. Have you gotten contact with Harry Salman?
No?
Not yet. He will contact you, and we will have a meeting just about these things in November next year. And then there is Harry Salman. You know him at all?
Not that, no, that Harry
No?
Salman.
Harry Salman.
Come in here.
Yeah, come on in, Frank. You're.
And is it H-A-R-I or H-A-R-R-Y?
Harry, I write it for you. I am so not good in doing this. Okay.
Thank you.
He is a Dutch anthroposophist. He's sort of unknown legend. He has an enormous knowledge, and he is planning a 1.5-month tourney in America next year, giving lectures and conferences.
Wow.
And he's working especially in the. We were just now 2 weeks ago. We were in Karelen, you know, the eastern part of Finland, where to work with you know, we have the Graal stream from Ireland and east, and then you have the Sophia stream from the east to west, meeting in Finland. preparing the sixth epoch. And that is his main work.
I'm very excited if he's coming in November.
Yes.
We can figure out how to involve him, with something where, that I don't know if we'll have it in August, but something to work out when we might our annual conference.
Yes.
So thank you for that. And again, Ari, I can't thank you enough. From my heart, I am so appreciative of what you're doing. I find it to have this Rosicrucian element to it, and I honor what you're doing. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will wish you then well with the ongoing meeting, and I am happy to have brought a little attribution, to this huge work that you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to bring the meeting to an end. Oh, what? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Ari. Bye-bye.
Bye.